Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Unloose the Goose, number 63, 63. Coming at you live and direct from Texas and Tennessee. Super excited to have you joining us today if you're watching live or listening on the podcast after the fact. Today, we are going to be talking about exit and build strategies, ways we can exit the matrix and build a better world in our personal life and collectively as a group. And we just have a few geese today. My name's John Bush, and I'll allow the other two folks to introduce themselves. Take it away, Jack.
I am Jack Spirko, one of the geese. We're going to have a good time tonight.
The one, the only.
I'm Neethi, the pharmacist, here in the food church in North Carolina. How are you guys doing?
Good. Good to have a permit for that church there.
Yep. You know how I am.
501 or whatever. 501, see me ignore the code.
Neethi's like Ron Swanson. She just has a piece of paper that says I can do what I want on it.
Yep. We don't have the whole vaccine passport thing here in Texas, but if I'm ever in an area where they're like, let me see your vaccine passport, I'll be like, 1 second, let me grab it for you. Right here. That's a middle finger for the podcast.
Audio people.
All right, I want to welcome all the folks popping in there. James Richter, Michael Sharp, Cormac Harkin, Joseph, Pippinize, Dr. Red Dirt, Redneck. We're going to be highlighting some of your comments. Definitely want to take your questions as well. Please, if you have questions, pop them in all caps, and we will make sure to get to all or most of them. Again, we're going to be talking about exit and build strategy. I thought it was something that was a concept that's been around for a while, but it turns out it was Derek Bros who coined that term specifically, although the concept's been around. It's essentially what agorism really is all about, exiting and building alternatives. But he wrote about it in this book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. And he was really speaking about it in terms of your geographic proximity. Do you hunker down and try to reform things or try to build community in your area? Or do you exit the community that you live in and build elsewhere? But I like to take it and expand it into all different aspects of our lives, not just our geographic area where we find our home, but different areas in our life, from business and finance, money, food production, off-grid, technology, social media, privacy, encrypted chat, and all that good stuff. So we're going to break down these different areas. We're going to talk to our geese here and share, get some of their ideas and some of their concepts and strategies. And we'd love you guys to engage and ask your questions and share some thoughts as well. So let's just kick it off. What does the term or the concept exit and build mean to you there, Jack?
I mean, to me, you're looking at two separate exits. I think a big part of it that you kind of alluded to there was kind of an exit geographically, and I see like that concept having come through our own country here several times in various back to the land movements. I think there's always been periods of times when people are just done with the cities. I don't know that it's ever been like it is right now, though. I mean, right now we are in a position where people are just really tired of it. And due to the republic that we live in here in the United States, we have some opportunities geographically, like moving to another state can change your life right now. But honestly, in some states, just moving, I don't know, a couple blocks or a few miles can change your life. And so I see that as one part of the exit and build strategy, is getting into something we would call a homestead, where we can provide our own food. We can start to build local community. We can be entrepreneurial. We don't have to have a permit for everything, et cetera. So you got that geographic component. And then exiting their system as much as possible. We do that through things like cryptocurrency, privacy technology. I've just got started setting up and configuring my Start9 embassy server. That's kind of another level of taking things, under your own control. And I think it's both of those things. And I think at this point, it's equally important. When I look back to like my parents' generation and that back to the land group, the people that were doing it in the 60s and 70s, they didn't really have to exit the second part because our whole lives weren't wrapped up in all this technology the way that they are today. And we weren't tracked the way that we are today. The one that people in charge didn't want to do it. They just didn't really have a mechanism. So today, I think it's both of those things. And again, I think they're both equally important.
Right on, right on. Yeah, it's cool how there's like cycles and phases in place. Kind of hear myself going back there. Niti, what do you think of when you hear the term exit and build, and what are some of the highlights? Why is that an important strategy for finding freedom?
I really think the first time I heard about it was from you. Now that I think about it, I mean, specifically that language, and it was so clear and concise. So I guess if Derek Brose came up with it, whoever did, that was great. Like, for me, I realized that I had been doing that all the time. As I was going rogue, I do like exiting and building as a term better than maybe saying I was rogue. And yeah, I mean, if you get pushed into corners long enough, then you're going to need to figure out how to pivot and operate. At least that's me, on a constant basis. Every time you push me in a corner, I'm going to pivot and try to figure out how to get out. And I feel like I am seeing a lot of people who are interested in doing that and feeling, I know this isn't exactly what you just asked me, but this is on my mind. Like, and also while we're walking into this conversation, I don't know about you guys, but like I've been noticing people here in North Carolina, kind of mourning what's going on right now, in the sense of they realize that they're interested in exiting and building, and they're finding out like people who they've been friends with for a very long time think they're nuts now all of a sudden, or even their spouse. Are you guys seeing this? Like, I'm seeing a lot of couples like starting to break away and everything with this whole thing. Like, and when I'm using those words with them, exit and build. Are you ready to exit and build? What are you guys thinking about doing for exiting and building? And they're all like going, oh man, I don't know. And do we have to like actually like build a whole new thing? Do we actually have to move? I like what you just said, Jack, about, it might not be that you have to go all the way deep out into the bush. You could just like, move a couple miles away from where you are right now and have a better position.
In some positions, in some places, yeah. In
some places. I mean, I was talking to this lady yesterday who was responding to an ad I put out because I'm looking for some folks to help join the church and help us in a few things that I'm looking for here, like some fermenting and some baking and some things going on here. And she was like, yeah, my husband and I are considering homesteading, but until we can get out of our jobs, or I don't know, whatever, something. I said, well, how about you? Do you know how to cook food from farms? Do you know what you would want to grow if you did go to homestead? Like, do you know how to use real food ingredients? Because she was telling me she was on a standard American diet. She was interested in talking with me to learn more about what I'm doing over here and working with me so that she could, work on like improve her skin condition because she found that wheat was a problem for her. And I was like, do you know how to cook? Like a chicken that would be just, fresh killed in the yard right now. Do you know if you would like it? Do you know if you would want to do that with any other like farm fresh food? Because a lot of people, you can't go from eating Doritos and drinking power drinks to all of a sudden eating off the land and finding joy in that. And are you going to, like, why don't you start supporting farms right now? Do you need to wait? You can do this in steps, guys. You can do it in stages. Yep. And so I say, start learning how to, some people just don't even know how to cook. And Jack, over your break, when you were gone, I was listening to you, one of your repeats. I forgot, rewind reels or whatever.
Rewinds.
The rewind thing that you do. I was listening to your thing about, prepping 101. Do you know how to cook? Like, do you even know how to feed yourself? Because you're not really allowed to do that currently. And I really enjoyed listening. I didn't realize that you're such a connoisseur. I'm like interested to see what you would cook cook up because I was like, wow, he's got skills, like cooking skills. But like, when I was listening to that episode but the truth is that I know too many moms, and I mean, maybe they're just attracted to me. They're coming here to learn, but they don't know how to even fry an egg, and they're crying because they don't even know how to make a burger. They don't know that you can even take ground minced meat of every kind and just shape it like clay into anything that you want it to look like. So, what is exit and build? I mean, maybe it just means that you learn how to patty a burger. When you just start doing that, like, it means a lot of things. But I mean, from where I'm sitting, I know I kind of just blasted that little thing out into a whole bunch of different pieces. But
it's cool, right? Like, I think that part of it is skill set. Like, and that's the thing. Like, let's say that, John, you weren't as far along in your journey as you are toward getting yourself into the position you want to be in, and you were still living, in a suburb of Austin or whatever. And let's go back 2 years before you started your process. Like, and then you're like, oh, I want to move. Well, obviously it takes 2 years because we went back from where you started it. Right. Like, so at that point, it's really easy to get into what I call the toolbox fallacy. And I can't remember who I stole that from. It was a dude on YouTube. I did a whole episode on it so since I want to move, everything waits until I move. So you see this all the time. People are like, well, I want to start a business. So the first thing I'm going to do is read a book. So they read a book, and then they read another book, and they read another book. Start your business and read a book, right? Yeah. And so you use like these things that prevent action. So but it's a legitimate thing. Like, most people can't just go like, you know what? I'm tired of living here. I'm going to move to the country and then do that by like next week. There's going to be a time lag in there. I've had moves like when my kid was still in school. I'm like, well, we're moving, but we're waiting till the school year ends, so I don't have to move him in the middle of school year. Like, that would be like one thing I could do for him. So there's going to be reasons we have to put that off, but you're going to start homesteading. Okay, so you're going to grow a garden, so you're going to want to learn to can. Well, go down to the farmer's market, buy a shitload of green beans, buy a good electric or an old school canner like an All-American, and learn to can. You don't have to wait to move to learn to can. Now, don't go can too much, because I've moved twice as a prepper, and it sucks. Oh, it sucks. It sucks so much worse than a regular move. But at least, like, learn that skill set. Start growing a few things, learn how, like, Nathan was talking about, like, how to take a chicken out of the backyard, from chicken walking around to chicken in the oven. You don't have to start there. Go to the grocery store if you have to. Buy a decent organic chicken that's a whole bird.
Yes.
And learn to take it apart. Like, I can take a chicken apart in literally like a minute flat. You don't have to be that fast to begin with, but they're like, we'll do a video on it. Like, just go to YouTube and put how to take a chicken apart. You'll find like 100 different people doing it. Yeah, well, guess what? They all do it the right way because it's all the same. The chicken's made to come apart. Learn to do that. Learn to then take that chicken and make 2 meals out of it instead of 1. Then learn to take the carcass of that chicken and make stock out of it. Like, things like that. Like, maybe people talking about with cooking. Like, just start somewhere. And get moving.
I mean, like, what's the worst thing that'll happen? I always say to the moms, I'm like, listen, get some ground meat, every kind that you can find, and try to pretend like it's clay and just freaking put it, the only thing that I advise is that, consistent cut equals consistent cook, or consistent thickness, or consistent patty, or consistent whatever. And, outside of that, just start. I mean, you're probably going to burn things, or you might undercook things a few times, but so what? I mean, what's the big deal?
And expand it, right? Expand it into other things. So, like, starting a business, like, well, I'm going to homestead. I'm going to have a homestead business. Once you build a business, then you'll have the money to be able to move to a homestead and not need a job anymore.
Correct.
Like that. I think that's a big part of it. Like, the exit, like, John, we were talking at the beginning, like, the exit is twofold today. It's not just getting out geographically. It's getting out of their system of control. I don't think there's anybody here that's worried about the vaccine mandates to keep a job for yourself personally, right? The three of us, like, we care for other people, but personally, I don't give a shit. Like, you can double impugn fire 6 ways from Sunday because I don't have a vaccine. Guess what? I'm not firing myself. Like, that's like one of the biggest things you can do to exit and build, to have something that's yours. And like, well, it applies to people over, I know they shot it down or whatever, but over 100 employees. I got 1, screw off, done, right? And I'm not firing myself because then I'm out of business.
Right. And I like your other one where we're just like, okay, then we have 10 businesses with 10 people or whatever it is, like.
I know someone actually did that. They have a big national business, where, I mean, the CEO has a private jet, so it's pretty successful. And they just have all sorts of different LLCs, and this LLC owns that.
S-corps and whatever.
They're not even like super passionate about it. They just are like, we don't want to have to deal with all the implications and all the regulations. I think too, you know, when it comes to the food production and the homesteading, even if you live in a suburban area or an apartment, chances are there's a community garden in your area or a local farm. And you know, the local farms will most definitely have you there to support, to volunteer and stuff. There was a place here in Austin called Johnson's Backyard Garden, and you go volunteer for like a little 3 or 4 hour session, and they send you home with a little CSA box, which is a good, you know, it's all organic. So it's a decent amount of food that they give you. It might even work out to like 12 or 15 bucks an hour if you think about the cost of the box. So there's always, if there's a will, there's a way. And one thing that I've been realizing more and more lately in business and in general, because we're entering more of a polarized world, and because there's so much division, and we're seeing these two groups of people, you know, the folks that are just going along to get along and they're buying into the program, and then the folks that are rejecting it with all this COVID stuff. People are really circling the wagons around their people, and they're like really inclined, if it's someone that gets it or that's freedom minded, or they are against the mandates and the vaccines and the masks and stuff. If you're clear and loud and proud about that, there's going to be people that are going to come to your aid, and they're going to want to help and support you just by virtue of you being part of the same group, right? I don't like the whole group thing, but like it or not, that's what we're facing. And so let's just really be out there and lead by example, help support people, help teach people. And then if you're someone that's more in the learning phase, go out and find a mentor or find somebody that's like-minded, that's already doing the stuff you want to do. And chances are, you know, more often than not, they're going to be willing to lend a helping hand.
Yeah. I think it's important for people to be prepared to give freely. I mean, and, you know, I think that in most cases, if you're genuinely wanting to learn, then there's plenty of ways in which you can, plenty of opportunities in which you can do that. So.
Heck yeah. All right. Well, we touched on business and entrepreneurship. Let's dive a little bit deeper there. Because, you know, when it comes to running your own business, being your own boss, there's so much freedom that comes along with that, whether it's not having to worry about mandates or OSHA this or OSHA that, or having the freedom to craft your own schedule, take a vacation when you want. One thing that I really appreciate about entrepreneurship, and I realized this when I was going through a divorce, it was like, all right, I got an attorney I got to pay for now, so I better double down on my business and make some more money. Whereas if you have a salary, you got a set salary, $60K a year or whatever, you got to figure out how to budget and squeeze and borrow money from here and there. But if you have a business and you have the belief and that ability to take massive action, then you can pull out of the business what it is that you need. If you're adding an addition to the house, if there's an emergency, if your elderly parent falls ill and they didn't prepare for their retirement or whatever, you can expand very quickly as opposed to slow, subtle raises all the time.
Well, you have 3 options instead of 1. So if you have actually you have 4, because you have the same one that the people have a job do as well. So the person with a job needs more money. Unless they're going to go deliver pizzas or drive Uber or something like that, they have one real option: cut expenses in the household. That's it. That's the only thing that they can do. Like, you know, that's all you got, or go get another job. So a person running a business can say, right, I'm gonna turn up what I'm doing in my business. I'm gonna run a sale. I'm gonna run a special. I'm gonna bring in another product. One way or another, I can increase my revenue. So there's one option. Another option I can do is I can look at the business itself, and I can fine tune the business and figure out, what am I paying for my business that's not giving me an ROI? Or if I'm, you know, one way or another, I can improve the ROI on what I'm doing, either by cutting expenses or even cutting production. So like one of the things Curtis Stone figured out when he was doing his farm was, I make 80% of my money on 20% of my crops. Mm-hmm. So most of the other 80% is gone. So I can lean out inefficiencies in the business, and thereby I don't maybe increase the top line revenue, but I increase the profit. So that's option 2. And the other thing is, I can fine tune, what else can I expense? What else can I take in my life and figure out how to incorporate into my business so I can create an expense? So I have 3 different ways that I can extract more spendable cash flow from my business. Plus I can do what the Joe Schmo employee does, which is figure out how to like get maybe switch electric providers or cut a streaming service or whatever, because that's all they have. And then if you're doing a business like John or I are doing, like my business is not geographically dependent on anything. I don't think yours is either, John. Like, so literally if they put a space station on the moon and it had DSL, there might be some latency, but I can run TSP off the moon, right? So if there's a geographic move that benefits me and my family's in on it and they want to do it, we can just do it. And so as much as this helps us now, like you said, with the OSHA crap and the COVID crap and all, man, I did this all the way back in 2008 because I was like, I want that freedom, and things were normal back then.
Yeah. Well, and also anybody, even if you have a job, you can always start a little enterprise or hustle on the side. And why not? I mean, why wouldn't you be trying to do not one, but 10 or as many as you could do on the side? And like Jack's saying, I mean, there's so many things that people can do online that are not tied to any geographic location or what have you, or even, they don't require you to actually go anywhere. You can do everything right from the comfort of your home or car or wherever you're at with internet.
Well, you have flexibility even with some of the gig economy stuff, right? Like my wife and I met this chick in North Carolina back about 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And she was hustling across the country, man. She was like, I got out of college. I got all the student loan debt. I don't want to carry this debt for the rest of my life, and I don't know where I want to live. So she was registered with both Uber and Lyft, and she would go to a place that she thought was cool. And when she was in Asheville, because Asheville's cool,
right?
And she's like, I'll stay here for like a month or two.
Mm-hmm.
She'd get her credentials moved there. She'd go to Airbnb and find like a cheap kind of room type thing instead of like a nice house or whatever. And that would she'd have a place to live immediately, show up immediately, have revenue, start working. And I'm like, so do you make enough money to pay off your student loan? She goes, I'm paying like. She said she was making like 5 times the required payment every month. She still had money left over, and she was accumulating savings on top of it. And she's like, I'm just going to keep going different places until I find where I want to be. And by then I'll know people that, I'm not going, eyes wide shut into a new market. I actually have friends. I've hung out, and I know that her biggest thing, this was what impressed me most, because she was like 23 years old, right? And she's like, the biggest thing is when I choose a place, I'll know that I've actually chosen the place that I want because I've been everywhere. Yeah. And I'm thinking about the people that, the classic, I'm going to backpack across Europe or whatever, like it basically waste my trust fund or whatever. And to contrast that with her is amazing. And like, so that would even work in this, because there's a few states that you can live in right now. We don't like, there is, I can't say there is no Plandemic anymore on YouTube. They have new terms and conditions, but there isn't in Texas, right? We don't have this here. I don't know what everybody else is talking about. It doesn't exist here.
Yeah, it's a blessing, and not being tied down to a job, or you got all sorts of retirement stuff and your 401k, and you're working your way up the corporate ladder. There's this tendency to stay in the same spot, to have some consistency, which is good. And it's all different strokes for different folks. Some people like the stability that comes with one career path or whatever, but we did enter into this era of the pandemics and all this crazy stuff. And it really does make a big difference where you reside. And one thing that's cool about the US, in my early days of political activism, we used to poke fun at the 10th Amendment and the idea of American federalism, right? This whole states' rights versus the central government kind of deal. We thought it was all just a facade, right? But, Michael Bolden with the 10th Amendment Center really helped to highlight some of the state sovereignty bills and nullification movement. And it really makes a huge difference where you find yourself now, whether you're in Texas, Florida, South Dakota, or many places in the South versus New Orleans or San Francisco and California and New York. It's like, it's night and day. So I kind of feel blessed. Like I always try to be grateful for the freedom that we do have without at the same time being, slavish or naive. But yeah, it's night and day. And if you are an entrepreneur, or you run your own business, or you just believe in yourself to go out and hustle, even if you take the gig economy approach, you can go wherever the heck you want. You can be a refugee. There's lots of refugees we're meeting these days coming to these events that we're doing and stuff from Canada and California.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many people are crushing it too. Like they'll start a business and like, one of the spouse, one of the of the side of the couple, when you have a couple, is more predisposed than the other. Cause some, like you said, they do like to have a job and benefits and whatever. And that's great, especially like to cover like health insurance and stuff. Cause like health insurance for me is extremely expensive for my wife and I. We can afford it, so it doesn't really hurt, but it's very expensive, And starting a brand new business, it would eat everything in the very early days. So having that one spouse kind of be the one that takes that on. But what I've seen, and we just had this workshop we did here, we had 90 people here. Everybody that did it, that really like actually put the effort in, once they started it rolling, it was a natural thing that within like a year, even if the other spouse wasn't predisposed to do it, they went ahead and they went all in together because it didn't make sense anymore. It didn't make sense anymore. Like instead of you going to work, you could be here and handle these things that are it's almost like a job, right? Like you take the less entrepreneurial side of this, maybe it's sending out bills, or maybe it's doing collections, or maybe it's packing stuff up for shipment or whatever, or yelling at the people that were supposed to pack it up for shipment or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, you watch these couples that have never run a business before in their life, and they get into something like one of the groups here, they're doing like teas. And they're doing a 6-figure business doing teas, right? Like blended different herbal teas and stuff, because they did it right. And they took a little bit, from your side of things, John, and doing some CBD stuff as well. But, it's all built around these teas, and they built $100,000 plus business in a year.
Yes.
Right. And like, so I think a lot of times people say they're more comfortable with a job, but it's because they don't believe that they can. And here's the thing, everybody can. And then when you say that, people are like, but if everybody did, okay, but don't worry about that because they're not.
Yeah.
Right? There's no competition.
Everybody can, but most people won't, which means you can.
Right. And there's no competition. That's what we were talking about the last episode. We were saying that this divide and conquer programming is the competition. It's not actually a real thing. And I believe, John, all of us have talked about, like, even if somebody does what I'm doing, it's their way of doing what I'm doing. It's not going to be what I'm doing exactly. Yeah. So there's no competition. They're going to put their twist on it or whatever it is. Yep. And so there's always room for everyone. This is an abundant universe. It's an infinite expanding universe. So there's no limits on these things.
Yeah, it's a scarcity mindset when people feel like if I share my strategy or I help this other person in the same industry that I'm in, then they're going to take away business for me. There's so many damn people out there. And even within our freaking liberty freedom community, there's so many freaking people. And if you tie your business to your personality, there's this concept called the attractive character, where you like put yourself front and center of your business. Then people grow to trust you and like you. And even if your product is more expensive elsewhere, like my kratom, for example, you can definitely get less expensive kratom in many different places. Mm-hmm. But people are doing business with me because they like me. They want to support me. And there's a whole freedom angle to all the language and messaging and some really high quality stuff. But that's cool to hear about the tea, because anyone can buy tea in bulk. Anyone can buy kratom in bulk.
They didn't even buy tea. They bought raw herbs in bulk and made their own blends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and like that, I think they actually got that start from like, I did an episode on how to do that on my podcast. And like, well, shit, we can do that.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And podcasting is a good component too. I did a Meet the Experts member session for Live Free Academy last night with Nicole. And she was sharing how she like basically started all these little side hustles at once to kind of see which one ends up being the best one. And coffee ended up being the big one. And most of her clients come from her podcast, which I imagine, Jack, obviously most of your revenues come in from the podcast audience. So starting a business and then starting a podcast on the side, which you guys did a whole episode. I wasn't there for that one. There's a whole episode on podcasting. It's a great marketing tool, and it's a great way to build relationships, and it's a great way to get the message out.
Well, personally, I think the most powerful form of marketing in the world is audio. And this is why. Like, first of all, I guarantee you right now we have like 82 people with their eyeballs on us on this video, plus whatever's on the platforms that don't get reported in. Okay, so a large portion of those are not actually watching this, except every once in a while they'll pull up and say, what are these goofs doing, right? So they're actually just listening while they're doing other things. But audio lets you do that, right? So if you're really paying attention to video, you can't drive, you shouldn't drive and watch a movie, right? You can't multitask and read. The one form of media we have that people can be out in their garden listening to, or at the gym on the treadmill listening to, or at work with their headphones listening at a reasonable volume, right? If you know that movie, right, is audio. And this is why, if you remember, John, like I'm sure because you're a student of info marketing, right? Like 80s and 90s, it was very common for somebody with a product to sell to pay out of their own pocket to make 10,000 audio tapes out and mail them to people in hopes that they would get in their car and stick that thing in there and listen to it. And now you can crank out one audio tape a day for free and broadcast it to the 8 billion people in the world with internet access.
Mm-hmm.
And the power of that is why podcasting has become so dominant. Like people are like, are you surprised by the fact that like Fox News, MSNBC, all these big giant media people that are on like TV and radio, like they all have podcasts now? I'm like, no, I'm not surprised at all. I'm surprised it took them that long to get in the game because it makes that incredible piece of marketing portable. And I don't like people get the wrong idea when you say marketing, like it's always out to get a sale or something. I'm talking about marketing a product, yes, but like Nicole doesn't get on and do her podcast and be like, you know, Holler Roast Coffee is the best in the world. Buy my coffee. She does her podcast and at the end says, hey, I sell coffee, right? She's marketing a concept. She's marketing an idea, freedom, liberty, you know, living free in Tennessee, right? Like she's marketing the lifestyle we're talking about today. And that marketing brings people in. Then they form a positive association. That's what you were talking about, John, with you. And then they want to do business with you. And the other side of it is they're like, I don't want them to go away.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want them to leave. So like if I'm their customer, then they'll be able to keep doing what they're doing and they won't go away. And that's where that 1,000 true fans model comes in that come out of the music industry. And that's what I built everything I built on is like, if I have 1,000 people that'll spend 1 day's wages a year on me, then based on a median income, as a base income, I have $150,000 a year revenue base income.
Yep.
And that's a very simple, very easy to understand formula. And then you can just kind of modularly build onto it from there.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, when it comes to podcasting, to show how powerful and influential it's become, just look at Joe Rogan. The dude's like a single power center himself. And like when he says, I love that he's like-minded in quite a few different areas, especially all the COVID stuff, like the ivermectin. Yeah. What's that sound you make, Jack?
Oh, yeah. Right. Like I think he was moving way, way, way left, actually. And then the COVID thing came and like slammed him into libertarian town, man. Like 100%. Like he seemed to be drifting. Drifting. And like, I think the thing that really threw him over the edge was when they said he was taking horse pills. Yeah. Because he took ivermectin. He flipped out. He's like, he just told somebody on CNN, you're supposed to be a journalist, motherfucker. Like, and he has like an audience of like 40 million freaking people.
Wow.
Like, I mean, it's insane, but you know what? Good for him.
I think also, Jack, he was always trying to be unbiased. And so he would have somebody who was totally left and then somebody totally right, like back to back almost. And then they tried to start censoring him. And when that happened, he was like, oh, hell to the no. Do you know who I am? He's like, oh, no, this is not how this is going to go. And then that, you know, because when they did that to him, it was about the same time that they were starting to censor the comedians, like my friend here, JP, who's doing his shirts and stuff. You know? But like when they started censoring comedians, because I mean, technically Rogan's a comedian / wrestler, whatever, fight guy.
MMA man.
Yeah, he's the fight guy. But
it's off the MMA people, man.
Right. He's the fight guy, but also he was doing stand-up, you know? And so when all that censorship started, he's like, wait a minute. Like, I make fun of everybody and I talk about everything. Like, what the hell? How are you going to censor me? Hell to the no. So, and then that was when he switched all his deals. Remember?
Yep. With podcasting success, Jack can definitely attest to this, and we can see it. It just like growing your own food, having a healthy relationship, whatever, it all has to do with persistence, right? So you do something and then you stick with it. It's not just a fly by night, or you start even doing 20, 30 episodes and they're just getting like 50 downloads or 100 downloads each. You got to keep at it and stick with stuff. And then there's that concept where you become an expert or a master after like 10,000 hours or some crazy number like that. So I think persistence is really critical in the pursuit of freedom. If you just stick with something long enough, eventually it's going to pay off. Now, of course, you have to be conscious and self-aware and know how to change and shift, right? You don't just stagnate and do the same thing over and over expecting better results. But, when you persist with something and you have a community there to support you and to bounce ideas off of, the sky really is the limit. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and operating with integrity, remaining clear and not walking the line, being very clear about, operating in clarity and not the chaos and the confusion, because people just are seeking relief. I think that's one of the reasons that the people that follow any of us, I believe, is because they're seeking relief and we're offering it,
It's really good not to water down your message or try to toe the party line or try to appeal to the most people, which is why the Libertarian Party is always such a failure, because they're like trying to be Republican light and they want to get as many votes. But I believe if they were to come out like Murray Rothbard style, or the early roots of the Libertarian Party, which was more about the actual philosophy of liberty, take Ron Paul, for example. He spoke truth to power, didn't water down the message, pull out of the wars, end the Fed, end all the federal departments, basically. And he ignited a mass movement. And then his son, Rand Paul, who is a total badass and so on our side with the COVID stuff. But when, if it weren't for Ron Paul being super pure, he wouldn't have even had the movement to piggyback on in order.
You wouldn't know his name.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know his name.
Senator Cruz kind of guy.
Yeah. And you can't do any side deals either, guys. That's the other part of it. No side deals.
What do you mean? Selling your soul to the devil kind of deal?
Well, walking the line again, kind of ish, like seeming like you take a side and then say, oh, but for you, so you can't operate with these side deals.
I think what she's saying really is unethical side deals, and that ethics being based on your core integrity brand. Like, because I try to push that my brand is integrity. You might think I'm a dick. You might think I'm wrong. You might think I'm a jerk and you don't want anything to do with me. And Jack Spirko's an asshole. And that's all fine. As long as you don't think I'm lying. As long as you don't think I'm deceiving you. If you're like, I think he's stupid and that's why he's wrong, but I don't think he's lying, I'm good with that.
Right.
I'm
you don't
fine
have to
with
agree.
That. You're stupid and you're wrong, but that's fine. I'm okay with that. But if you think I'm lying and deceiving, I'm doing something wrong. Now, you can have one hater crawl out of the wood and say I've been called a CIA shill, things like that. And there was actually, back when Ron Hood was still alive, we have a picture where we're all wearing blue berets together and shit. Like, we were trolling people like that. I'm not talking about that rare person, but if there's a significant portion of people that think you don't have integrity to your own message,
right?
No matter what you're doing in business, you have a serious freaking problem, right? And so you can hate me or anybody else as long as you don't think they're lying. Then at least I believe that person's doing what they think's right. Then I'll listen to them even if I don't agree with it.
Right? Yeah, integrity and consistency really goes a long way, especially these days where people are just geared towards being very hesitant and skeptical. That was another, back to Ron Paul. I remember back in 2007, 2008, when I was stumping for Ron Paul, I became an anarchist and wasn't into the 2012 campaign. But it became clear that this whole campaign is a list building effort in order to get Rand Paul in, which is great political strategy, for their little empire and dynasty that they built. But I remember it was always easy to answer questions on the campaign trail when people would ask what Ron Paul's position was, because I didn't even have to formally know what his position was, because he was so true to his principles and the Constitution and free markets and non-interventionist foreign policy. So any little nuance, and you just go back to what those first principles are, I think that was pretty cool. And on the same token, it's hard to get caught in a lie if you stay true to all that stuff. Right. So let's, all right. So I wanted to cover a variety of different topics. We've hammered the entrepreneurship, running a business pretty heavily. Let's talk a little bit about food. I know that we beat that to death on this show, so let's not spend too much time on it, but, exiting the centralized food supply chain, I think, is probably one of the most, if not the most critical things we can do, because at the end of the day, without food, we're totally screwed. And one thing with COVID that really just illustrated that this is the real deal kind of stuff. It's no longer like prepping for some obscure thing that may or may not happen, or Russia invades, or global thermonuclear war, or some random natural disaster. It was like, holy shit, me and my fiance and our kids, we had to tap into our food storage, and we were damn grateful that we had it. So why don't you guys share, because you guys are really well versed in this field, what are some good things people can do in their lives in order to become more self-reliant and focus more on local food systems compared to dependent on the grocery store 100%?
You want to go first, Neethi?
I can do it. I would say, well, I was having this conversation with this person who said that they can't wait till they can go have their land so that they can homestead. And meantime, I'm like, do you know what to do when you get out there? You need to start. How about, even the farm partners that I have right now that are anchoring the food church, they started by supporting another farmer first. They started by only purchasing from farms because they needed to know what it was that they liked about it or didn't like about it, or how they may or may not want to do something different, or understand why there was a way to do it differently or not. One of the things I say to people is, if you're used to only shopping out of a grocery store, then when you join the CSA here, or come join us here in the food church, you may or may not understand why we do or don't have something that you normally like to eat. So ask me what it is that you're looking for, and maybe I haven't had that particular item cut, or we haven't raised that, with the produce guys or whoever that I'm working with. Maybe because nobody asked about it before. Maybe we never thought of it before. Maybe it's just something that you're introducing to us. Maybe it's not real. Maybe it's just something you were getting out of the grocery store and it's not even a real thing. And so, no, we're not going to do it. So, I think that it would be nice for people to start by learning from supporting real farmers, people who they can put their eyes on. That's I think step one. And also learning and knowing, I think everybody here who knows anything about prepping, you don't want to grow or raise something that you don't even like to eat. That's a whole big another thing. I mean, I know a lot of folks that are like, yeah, I planted all this stuff because, so-and-so said this grows real fast and easy and whatever, but we totally don't like it. We don't want to eat it. Okay, well, maybe you need to figure out what you want to grow. Put a little more focus on that. And for example, I'm super carnivore, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to have gardens or anything of that nature, because obviously we want to maintain some spectrum of food items. And so, I am going to still have a lot of dry goods on hand just in case of emergency, and so where am I going to get that? Or am I going to grow it and dry it and, dehydrate those things or whatever? I also think that, the Freedom Cell folks that we're dealing with here in our area, we're all collaborating and working together. And a lot of the people that come here to the church, I tell them when they join our food church here that I'm prepping for them on their behalf in terms of all the livestock, but they're also prepping, and so collectively we're all helping and supporting each other. So our relationships that we're investing in each other here are, I think, even more powerful because they're prepping a little bit in multiple ways in terms of food production, maybe they're growing herbs, maybe they're doing microgreens, maybe they're have an all-out garden, maybe they have livestock also. Maybe they have all this livestock but don't know how to harvest it, and we do, or something of that nature. So, I think community, I think that's part of your other topics. So I'll kind of skip that. But this, I mean, it gets back to the community part. But once you are doing food, I think that people will find that this food piece affects economies and relationships and health, and kind of encompasses a little bit of all the topics that we would want to talk about right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Community makes all this stuff easier whenever you have a helping hand and you got somebody that has some wisdom and stuff. All right. What do you got, Jack, on the food production front? How we can exit the systems, centralized systems, the big factory, ugly, unhealthy systems, and build better stuff.
Well, cool. So Neethi hit real hard on the knowing your farmer, buying local, all that stuff. And I knew she would. That's why I wanted her to go first, because now I can not really talk about that and talk more about what you can do for yourself, right? And like Neethi, I'm very, very toward the carnivore end of the spectrum. Even the vegetation I do eat is very low carb, almost none in reality. Like, how much carbs are you going to get from, leafy greens? And kind of that's right. I say to start, I just did a podcast this week on getting started with hydroponics indoors during the winter, because you have this little perfect place. It's not surrounded by pests and no deer come eat your stuff or anything like that. And you can learn how to grow greens. And then you can use that same system to make your plants to put out in your garden this spring. So it's a real simple thing. And I went through how you can do that for like $100 and produce a few salads a week for your family of 4 for, total setup costs under $100. And that'll pay for itself in a month or two, because go price greens, good, fresh, beyond organic greens by the pound at a grocery store. And you'll be paying about what you pay for like good beef, right? Like it's really the most expensive thing that there is that you buy in the produce section. And and there's a reason everybody does it for commercially, excuse me, is because it's high dollar, it's fast turnaround, and you can cut a plant and it grows back. So grow some lettuce, grow some herbs, grow some basil and things like that. Winter, summer, summer outside, winter inside. And then I think everybody should really look at trying to do some form of livestock. If that's 4 laying hens and all you're producing for yourself is eggs, that's fine. But something like that. If you want meat and eggs, then look at quail. If you want the best meat yields you're going to get and the easiest means of feeding them, even from a small backyard, growing some clover and grass with a bag mower, look at rabbits. There's all different. I do ducks. If you want one of the highest quality meats you can do, grow Muscovy ducks. You're only going to get eggs in 2 big bursts a year, but my God, it's one of the best eating things on the planet. And pick something and start with one and put the infrastructure in first. And the reason for it is, I don't care what you do to your soil. I don't care if you have the best composting system in the world. And I don't care if like 400 people come and chant and channel the energy of Gaia into your garden. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not mocking it at all. I'm just saying, even if you did that, you're not going to get the nutrient density from a carrot or a beet or a tomato that you'll get in one little liver from a quail or a rabbit.
Yeah.
The nutrient density that we can produce with livestock, or a truly beautifully produced egg, the nutrient density, and I'm talking all those macronutrients that the people on TV tell you need dehydrated fruits and vegetables in a capsule for, all of it. The nutrients that you require as a human being come from animals. I'm not saying it's the only place you can get them, I'm saying, but the density from animal product is so far above everything else. And that's where I think people should really start. What I say is grow some of your surplus nutrient and roughage, but your calories, if you're going to grow it on site, start with animal products. If you get 4 little chickens, like your first egg will cost you like $150. If you have to feed them until they, at 22 to 24 weeks, they pop out that first egg. Everything after that is great. Like it's free eggs for as long as that bird can put them out. And then you've got a stewing hen at the end of it. Like, do something with livestock. If it's bees are livestock. I'm not big on sugar, but hey, it's a product bees are a business, right? So now you've got a food and you've got a business. You've got wax, you've got honey, you've got selling nukes, you've got medicine, you've got bee bread, you've got, I can't think of the stuff now that they use to like this like a glue that they use to fix holes in their hives, whatever that stuff is. That is a medicine, right? That for some reason that word's escaping me. Like, do something with animals. And when people are like, but I live in the suburbs. I know a guy that lives in Michigan, keeps one stack of quail cages in a 1-car garage in a subdivision, and he produces over 20,000 eggs a year and over 1,000 coal birds a year for meat. And the way he keeps all his neighbors quiet, he gives them meat and eggs, and they all shut their holes, right? So, like, there's a way if you have the will.
Heck yeah. Yeah, I appreciate what you said about the chickens and the livestock. I mean, I've never done any livestock besides chickens, but we had over 120 chickens at one point, and it was most definitely easier to raise the chickens for the eggs and to slaughter the chickens, which I learned how to do just watching YouTube videos. Way easier to do that than to take something from seed to fruit in the garden. There was always issues and the freezes, and I still haven't grown an ear of corn ever. Just can't get it done. It's hard. I've grown okra.
You're not in a good region for it, John.
Yeah.
And neither am I.
And you got to get the pH and the soil just right. And so the livestock will help fix that too. And so if you're going to plant a garden, plant it for the livestock. I mean, and then you have the garden as a backup. Because the other part of it is, if you're doing what Jack's saying, I'm also going to push feed freedom for the livestock. And so, grow the squash for the chickens, for the hogs, for the beasts on the land that you're going to manage, because they'll eat that and they can appreciate it and they can turn that into treasure for you. So, I mean, we talk about putting up cow panels and, growing squash on the vines where they're just falling down. And that way those birds or hogs or whatever, those beasts are they're eating it out the front end and planting it back into the soil and scratching it in with their feet and out the back end. So that's the regenerative aspect of that, right?
Definitely. One thing I grow every year through all my swale berms where all my trees are, I go through, and when I have the birds working a different part of the property, and in the spring when it's going to rain, I go through and I throw, 25 pounds, half a bag of the cheapest black oil bird seed sunflower that there is. Yes. And then once they get up a foot, then I let the birds back in that part of the property because they don't bother them because they love the sprouts. But then you get all these sunflowers growing. They're very, very hardy. Almost nothing bothers them. And you end up with these great big heads full of, and I just cut all the heads off and hang them out in my back shed to dry out. And I don't harvest that. I just take the whole heads and throw them where the ducks are, and they go in and they pull all the seed out. I do that with sorghum. I grow like old school sorghum. It's pure sugar for a human. I'm not going to eat it. It's syrup basically, but I grow this, I grow Mennonite sorghum, and it's called White African Giant. The stalks get as big around as like a Coke can, and they get these huge heads on them, and you just chop the head off and throw it on the ground, and the birds eat it. I grow a water plant that's, not on the approved list of things to grow in Texas called water hyacinth. It has more protein than soy does. But it doesn't have isoflavones, which are estrogens, by the way, which do not belong in your body if you're a man. And if you're a woman, you can have too much. And if you feed estrogens, soy, to a bird that lays an egg, and you eat the egg, it's an estrogen bomb. And I've confirmed that with scientific studies by people who wanted to prove it was true because they thought it was a good thing. And so I'm feeding my birds black oil sunflower. I'm feeding them natively grown sorghum. I'm feeding them these water plants. I'm feeding them minnows. All of that's being produced here. And the amount of calorie yield I get out of the per hour worked compared to growing peppers and tomatoes. And you in here, John, I grow that stuff too. I like having a little bit of it around, but I could never get the yield. I'm watching the show right now on NBC, I guess it is. It's on one of the streaming services called La Brea. And these people end up falling through like a time portal, and they're like at 10,000 BC or whatever. And they finally meet these other people, and then they're like getting along with them, and like they're growing a garden and they're living off their garden. I'm like, bullshit. Like there was this giant sloth, like the size of like 5 elephants walking through there. It's like, kill the sloth. You'll all eat for 6 months. The people that lived in that time, they lived off the megafauna that used to be here, you know?
Yes.
And we can learn from, like, if you want to know how to feed yourself, and I don't want to piss off vegans or vegetarians too much, but it's the truth. If you look at primitive man and you look where he got the most of his calories,
right.
It's animal systems, man. And if you want to restore, I know I'm preaching, I'm sorry, I'll stop. But if you want to restore land that's been destroyed by our activities, even if you don't eat the animals, you need the animals to restore the land when you get into broad acre systems.
Right. You have to do it with them massaging the soil. And also, by the way, I bet, Jack, when you're feeding those birds the way that you are, you've also noticed that they're more fertile and you get more eggs.
Oh, yeah.
Because you put animals on a soy feed, the birds, and you get less egg production. They actually, I don't think they even get all the way through all 300 ovum, you know, for their like all the ovum that they carry. They can't even release all of them. At least that's what we've seen on scale.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. And I don't know, like, when do they go into week, you know, with chickens, we call it henopause, but just on the count, properly, like, a chicken is born with 1,000.
Yes.
That's it.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm doing the
per
300
year.
count per year.
Per year,
because,
okay.
Yeah, because we only keep the flock for a year, because if you're doing it for profit and timing
Burn
and
them
all
over.
of that, then maybe we do stew hands at the end. So
and that's what we do. That's why we do ducks. They have a 1,500 count of shots out the barrel when they're born, and you can get 3 good seasons out of a duck. And after that, they're expensive pets.
They're just really, I mean, that's what I try to tell folks, because they're like, well, you always want them for the eggs. I'm like, they only have but so many ovum. So, and they actually slow down, and, you know, they're not giving them to you every day, or, you know, as close to every day after that first year. So that's the efficiency aspect.
I was like, we're off the rails, man. We're into egg production now.
Sorry.
It's fine.
You did say something that I was going to talk about, and then I forgot it. So sorry.
It's all right. I think the meat stuff is super critical. It's weird that meat is controversial.
No, it's not weird. It's a plan, John. It's the plan.
Yeah, I guess
it is a very deliberate and intentional plan. So it isn't weird. It is exactly the opposite of what they want you to be thinking about, which is the plan.
I'll tell you what's a good piece of news. Good piece of news on that came out this week. A group of very large ranchers, and ranchers tend to have money, have put together over $300 million in a consortium to set up their own processing facilities. Now, I understand that's going to be, you know, the devil type of processing, but at least it's going to put meat on tables, because they're tired of a few plants in the country controlling the flow of their product. And they have, you know, there's empty shelves, and they have product, and they can't get the product to market. So good for them.
So I'm wondering how the centralized, you know, corporatocracy is going to allow them to come through with that. And I'm hoping they're not going to push them too hard. And then, of course, we've got, you know, Congressman Thomas Massey, who's fighting for them to be able to process without any of that oversight that is, like, unconstitutional. He's pushing that, you know, every day also. So yeah, I was wondering how long it was going to be before they were just like, excuse me, we're not doing this anymore, kind of thing. And so that's cool.
What it's all about, taking power into your own hands. And there's all these examples. This is one of them, what you just shared, of, like, folks that aren't conspiracy theorists or agorists or anarchists. They're just getting fed up with it all too, and they're just going and figuring out their own path and their own methodology, and cutting out the middleman and insulating themselves from the technocracy and all the BS. And then there's so many people that are, like, really skeptical, and that it's almost as though they want the tyranny to exist, or they want our freedom movement to fail, to, like, reinforce their doing nothing or something. I don't know. But they're always like, how could they possibly do this? And how could it possibly
I think they just don't believe it, John. I was wondering about that too, you know, and I'm like, do they just need to really see it before they believe it? And I'm like, dude, we're not trying to let it get that far, brother. We're not.
I'll tell you what causes it, and the powers that be understand it, and then they harness it and use it. And it's an evolutionary trait. So let's say we go back to 10,000 BC, and me and John and Neethi and 20 other people are all walking through the woods. And, you know, 25 of 20, 23 of us, whatever, all go, that doesn't look really good. Neethi's like, no, fuck that shit. I'm going to go do that. And it's a saber tooth. Well, Neethi gets the chomp and Neethi dies. Right. So there is a certain amount of like the like tribal wisdom of more people. Right. Yeah. And if you look at things like, remember that stupid TV show? I don't know if it's still on, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? No matter how hard the question is, when the person said, I'm going to ask the audience, they almost always get it right in the majority when there's a split decision in like this. If it's one thing not tied to a bunch of emotional crap, if it's just, which movie won the Academy Award in '89 or whatever, like usually the crowd gets it right. So we evolved in this concept that when like the 5 dudes that are the oldest dudes in the tribe said, don't go in that hole, you didn't go in the fucking hole, right? And that made sense. But now we've gotten to a point where like I've seen some of these psychological tests they do. They like have a bunch of people in a doctor's office and like only one person's not in on it. They walk in and all of a sudden like they ring a bell. And all the people that are in on it, every time the bell rings, they stand up. And when the bell rings again, they sit back down. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, the person that walks into that office within 2 cycles, even though they're looking around like it's stupid, they start standing up and sitting down with the group. And that's that psychological thing that we evolved with that had a purpose being turned against us. That's where all that shit comes from. That's why, like my sister-in-law told my wife, like, yeah, I wear my mask when I go out in certain places where other people are wearing masks because I want them to be comfortable. No, that's your way of hiding what you're doing. You're conforming.
Correct.
Right. And I don't want to turn this into a mask rant. It's just because it's just one example. People conform like, oh, we have to have government. Why? Because you were told that in school. Yeah. Right. Like, and if you think about elections in school, right? Like, think about a high school class election. Like, the popular kids run for election, and the ones that are like the most popular win. And they have no power. They have no authority. And they have no positions on anything. They just kind of run like because they want to be in student government or whatever. There's your conditioning to vote. Your politicians don't have power. No, right. the government funding them they might as well NASCAR jackets or something with sponsorships on them. They're the ones with the real power, but you're conditioned to conform. You want to piss somebody off, tell them you don't vote.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You're so un-American. It's so un-American of you. Oh my
God. People died for your right to vote. I'm like, listen, motherfucker, I served in the military and I never once was in the shit with somebody and turned them and said, you know what we're doing this for? So those motherfuckers back there can vote, right? Like that conversation's never happened in a trench or a foxhole ever, and it never will. It's bullshit.
I want to shout out Bobby Joe Woods here. She says the Twin Cities Freedom Cells here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, hosted an Exit and Build Summit watch party last night, and we got lots of good discussion going afterward. That's what it's all about.
Nice.
Awesome.
Nice.
Tuning in. I hope you guys are kicking some butt up there in Minneapolis, St. Paul. All right, we have 84 people tuned in live. We had 100 at one point. A lot of them are here on Jack's channel there. So we definitely would love if you guys engaged, ask some questions. If you do have questions, you can ask in all caps. The topic for today is exit and build strategy. Exiting the matrix, exiting the centralized, coercive, corrupt institutions, and building alternatives that are decentralized, voluntary, just, regenerative, more in line and more in harmony with the earth and all its beautiful plants and creatures. And that's what it's all about. We've talked about entrepreneurship and business. We just talked about food. Let's talk about health and wellness. And to start that conversation, maybe Neethi can share that shift that took place in the 1900s here in the U.S., having to do with the old Rockefellers and the F word that I know you like to share so much. Tell us about that, because I think it's really good to set the stage of what it is that we need to exit, because in many ways, a lot of what we're talking about, it's like new, and it's new when we mix it up with some decentralized technology, right? And some NFTs and some pirate chain, right? That's the new aspect. But a lot of what we're promoting and the lifestyle that we're living, the hosts of this show, it's going back to the more traditional ways. And before all this dependency on pharmaceuticals and stuff, there was more traditional medicine. So break that down for us if there's any new listeners that hadn't heard that whole story.
Yeah, I think it's very important for people to know how this was all established. This isn't conspiracy theories. So anybody who's interested in looking this up, look up the Flexner Report from 1910 when John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie became the primary investors in pharmaceutical medicine. And, for those of you who don't know, I mean, I think a lot of people just think that when we throw out the names Rockefeller and Carnegie that, these are the conspiracy theorists. Well, look it up, you guys. These were documents that were filed with the U.S. Congress in 1910. And it's not a little bit of papers. It's like, it's a very large document. So, and what's interesting is it is actually the reason for all the centralized systems that you're currently experiencing. That would be the medical mafia. That would be our, centralized fake food system. That would be, the federal, the IRS and all the centralized economic structures, all of every centralized structure, including all the centralized education. So when we are talking about exit and build, we're talking about exiting all of these centralized systems. I think it's interesting that some people are able to understand the food aspect or the economic aspect or the medical aspect or the education. You got a lot of homeschoolers and things like that. But they can't see the whole picture. The Flexner Report can actually, help you understand that from all sides. But in terms of medical specifically, the Flexner Report, what they did was they said anybody who is practicing medicine right now and is acknowledging that the body has energy, they should not be allowed to practice medicine. And then they went on to establish the standard of care that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, which is what all the physicians and any licensed health or medical practitioner must operate under today, including the licensed chiropractors or massage therapists or even the licensed homeopathic professionals, especially here in the States. They all have to operate under standard of care. So even if they are holistic, even if they are like chiropractic or whatever, they still cannot speak outside of the standard of care, even if they know better, because it de facto became a law at that time. What does de facto mean? That means it's not a real law. It's not a real law, meaning like you as a consumer, and I should say, like I always say, I'm not going to deal with consumers. I only want to deal with eaters with my food church here. That is because if you're a consumer, to me, you're kind of programmed, you're in the programming, and you want to operate under that litigious protection. And so for that same reason, medical professionals, they're not allowed to speak freely with you because we've created this mob rule, this litigious society that doesn't allow people to just speak freely, where two adults can't just have an open conversation, honest conversation anymore for fear of litigious threat. So technically, anything I'm saying when I'm here on Unloose the Goose or wherever, I'm really not allowed to say that. But under my food church, I am the high priestess of the pasture here, and I can, preach to my congregation whatever it is that I want to, because they choose to come and hear what I have to say. So as the general population, as the mob, you have all the power to choose if you want real medical help from unlicensed, unregulated, unpermitted people outside of this standard of care, or you have to only, the medical professionals will only operate under that standard of care because they have that license and they're under litigious threat and can't speak outside of that. So as we're breaking out of these systems, if you want to exit that system, how do you do it? A lot of folks I know say, well, hey, Neethi, I'm on, my medication for my type 2 diabetes. Well, you could stop walking in the fragility of needing that medication every single day, because there's a way to move towards a robust health. And, type 2 diabetes is something that you can get rid of if you were to just have a better lifestyle. You just need to choose to walk away from that. So if you are wanting to exit from the medical tyranny, which started because of the standard of care, then you should, you should know that there's a way for you to find your way out of that.
Yeah. Yep. It was, and what they shifted away towards the allopathic method, which is more reactionary. And then, of course, the pharmaceuticals are made with petrochemicals, which is one of the reasons why Rockefeller was in on it. And I think the whole Rockefeller family and the Rockefeller Foundation, I think they're driven by more than just profit, right? Which can explain a good chunk of it. But at the same time, they just show up so many times when it comes to this whole conspiracy to create a totalitarian global government. And even David Rockefeller, who passed more recently, he even said that in his memoirs, like, if that's what a bunch of people think, and I'm proud of it, guilty as charged. But
it was all on purpose, y'all.
Yep, it's all made it happen on purpose. So many stuff. I think COVID was a made it happen on purpose kind of deal too.
Correct.
But yeah, just getting more in line and giving your body the nutrients that it needs in order to heal itself, because it's a really great machine. I mean, it's quite phenomenal what our bodies can do. Even we take it for granted, right? But if someone gets cut and then that cut just heals back up, like, that's pretty freaking cool that our body can do that. And people can go through hell, and take a beating, and have all sorts of issues. And if you're given the proper nutrients and the proper care, then you can really come back from quite a bit. And so I think people just really need to tune into our own body's wisdom, and try to, when you can reach a baseline of health where you don't have the aches and the pains and the fatigue. And oftentimes I reached that point back in the day by doing just a 30-day strict paleo, and like no toxins, and it was no grains, none of that. That's when I realized that I have a gluten intolerance. But I remember before I did that, I just had constant little aches and just kind of little discomfort in my body. And then we visited our naturopath, and he's like, well, we want to reset your system, try this out. And after that, it just all went away. It wasn't the constant little, just, it wasn't like total pain, but it was just like not pleasurable. And it was just kind of annoying. And it's all about, a lot of people think it's about what you take, right? And so there's supplements and all sorts of stuff that helps. But I think what's more important is what you take out, what you leave out.
Eliminate.
Yeah.
Are you sure you're gluten intolerant, or were you being poisoned by plants? Because, there's that part of it. And so I think that, no one wants to say that, because the orthodoxy has us programmed so powerfully.
No, there's a very valid point that she's making, in that whenever you look at a plant that you're going to consume, you need to ask yourself a question. Does the plant benefit from me consuming this part of the plant? Right? That's the first question to ask. Does the plant benefit from me consuming this part of the plant? And you might think, well, that's insane. That would never benefit the plant. It might. Like if you eat a cherry tomato and it's not 2021, it's 10,000 BC, and you eat the analog to a cherry tomato that was wild in the woods, and you take a crap, the seeds come out in your crap and the plant grows. So the cherry tomato, the fruit, it's seasonal, and you're not going to have that kind of sugar load year round in any normal situation. But the plant is probably not going to try to kill you because you ate it, because the plant has a benefit derived from your consumption of the plant. Correct. If a plant does not benefit from you eating it, you know what you are. In the mind, the intrinsic intelligence of that plant that's a being, you are a predator. And if a predator tries to eat you, you try to resist it. So many plants have what we call anti-nutrients. Yes. And these are designed to combat being consumed. Now, if you think wheat is human food, I have a suggestion. Really don't do this. Trust me, what's going to happen if you try. Go out into a wheat field and take the stalks of dried wheat and get a big handful of like fresh wheat in your hand and try to eat it. Don't do it, because you're going to fucking choke to death. It's literally going to stick in your throat, and you will not be able to get it back up out of your mouth, because if you eat a grain, your body does process it enough that when you take a crap, it doesn't grow new grain. Yeah. So that plant is literally being killed by you eating it. So it's going to try to kill you back. Yeah. And that sounds insane until you just think about natural selection and evolution, right? Science. If you actually think about actual science, of course, a plant that is damaged by you consuming it would over time develop defensive mechanisms to make your elder tribal guys go, no, don't eat that. And Mark Shepard put this brilliantly one time. We're sitting with a group of people talking about it, and this goes, but it's all natural and it's healthy. He's like, it's for birds. Grains and seeds are for birds. Birds have a crop. The seeds go in there and the crop grinds it up. You don't have a crop. You have a giant liver. You know what that's for? Processing meat. And it was like kind of one of these, I call them purple breather permaculture chicks. And she went purple to red, and she was like steaming, but she went right? Because there was such a logic in that. So when Neethi says some plants try to kill you,
yeah,
not kidding. Some plants try to kill you because you're killing them.
Yeah. I mean, nature operates in an order, guys. And what we're talking about is that this chaos that's happening right now in the world is us going back to natural law. We're actually going to be going back to natural law, and nature operates in an order, and you can't just make that up. We're not just making that up. There's no science. Science is the study of nature. Okay. Let's just say what it is. Science is just the study of nature. Nature has this all figured out. And yeah, plants can't walk or run. Bobby Joe Woods is saying plants can't walk or run away, so they have toxic anti-nutrients to attack what eats it. Yes, it definitely does. No one ever talks about the poisoning. They're like, I'm allergic to it, or I am intolerant. No, you're just you're poisoned by the plant, and most of us are.
You're more sensitive to the poison than the other person is.
Right. That's all it is. We're all being poisoned, but we all have a different tolerance level. Also, I choose not to be in any amount of discomfort or pain. And once you've experienced not having that pain, you are not going to choose ever to go back to it. Like John Bush, you just had this experience, I had an experience similar to that where, wheat was causing arthritic bone pain. You can't pay me $1 million to eat a bite of wheat, because I will not tolerate that pain for no reason at all. I'm just not going to do it, because it takes it takes about a year for me to get over that bone pain, and hell to the no. I'm not going.
A lot of people never operate from that baseline of good health, and so they don't know that there's a better way to live that feels better, because they're just constantly pounding the sodas and the sugar and the wheat and the processed food and all that stuff.
Way back when I started my show and I started talking about things like this, I got people saying, you're discrediting modern medicine and you're not understanding, how much modern medicine has done to extend lives. Because of course they were taught that everybody died when they were 14, back in like colonial times or whatever. Everybody just died, right? You had to get married at 14 and prop out kids by 25, because by 30 you were an old man and dead. And that's just not the way it works. So I went through and I said, okay, you know what? There were a lot of zeros. There were a lot of deaths at childbirth and things like that. Because we did, to be fair to medicine, we did learn certain things like wash your damn hands when you go from delivering one baby to delivering another baby and things like that. But if you got off the zero, if you made it out of childhood, I was like, well, I wonder if you had basic shelter, basic food, basic resources, how long did you live? So I went through the entire list of every single one of our founders that signed the Declaration of Independence. And I don't remember what the age was, but it was the difference for a white male in America today, because they were all white males, was 0.8 years. That was as of 2009 when I did the experiment. We gained all this shit. If you made it off the zero, and you made it into adulthood, and you had food, water, and shelter, you live 0.8 years longer. We have, our pharmaceutical thing with all the drugs in it now is like as thick as the tax code. And all of that bought us 0.8 years. Now, so you have to ask yourself if we really
the life expectancy is getting worse now.
And actually,
what about the Eskimos?
We might be going back the other way because, like, this year or last year was the first time we went down.
What
and
about
it ain't COVID that did it.
No,
it ain't COVID. It's the fact, like, so my wife had to have a medical procedure recently, and if you go into a hospital, they bring you out with a wheelchair whether you need it or not. And I'm looking at the freaking wheelchairs, and I'm going, what the going on? And I realized, like, oh, they have to have like these giant freaking wheelchairs now because people weigh 400 and 500 pounds.
Yeah.
And this is like, I'm not fat shaming here. I'm saying, like, no, you're not healthy at any size. That's not a thing. Your heart can't beat when it's surrounded with fat. Like, there is optimal, and then there's okay, and then there is, are you out of your fucking mind, right? And to have a society where poor people are morbidly obese is the most counterintuitive thing. If you go back 150 years or more, poor people were all skinny.
Yeah.
Now the fattest people are the poorest people because they live on the gruel. And the gruel makes you fat, man. I'm sorry. It just does. You got to exit the gruel.
There's money being made on fat, sick, and nearly dead people. I mean, most of the biggest, poorest people actually are paying $1,000 for their diabetic medication or whatever it is. And they feel like they can't afford vegetables because they got to buy their insulin. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, or just stop eating Taco Bell. So they go through the drive-through and eat the Taco Bell because they can't afford anything but the Taco Bell because they got to use $1,000 for their insulin. Oh my gosh, like, how about fasting? Just fast at that point, like, try to just go.
You're gonna be all right. You can afford to fast. If you have a leg that one leg weighs 100 pounds, you can fast for a month. I promise you, you'll be okay.
Right. I mean, people argue me to death, Jack, about the wheat thing. I'm like, what about fasting for 40 days? That was also a thing. If you want to argue with me about wheat, like,
I mean, I ain't doing it, but it was a thing, and there is a legitimate.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, if you want to bring up the wheat for God thing or whatever you're trying to say to me, well, fasting for 40 days is also equivalent. So why don't we just try that? Why don't we do that?
Maybe if they ate more fish and less bread, they wouldn't have had to fast so long. I don't know.
Right. Well, they take one little piece that they don't hear about the sacrificial lamb.
Yeah.
Which was so powerful.
Well, you know what you sacrifice? You sacrifice a thing that has high value to you.
Exactly.
Right? That's what you say. If you're sacrificing in any religion, like, I really have no emotional attachment to this little thing I'm holding up. This is like a piece of aquarium filter. Like, so if I take this and give it as a burnt offering to my deity, I really haven't sacrificed anything, have I? Right? Because there's nothing, like, this is a scrap piece I'm going to throw away anyway. So why sacrifice a lamb instead of a sheep or a ram? You know why? Because the lamb tastes better. That's why you sacrifice the lamb, because it's premium food, because it's young and it's tender and it's fatty and it's delicious. That's why you sacrifice the lamb instead of the old mutton sheep that you had to stew before there were pots. You had to stew it with rocks and skins to make it edible.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of old wisdom in the Bible, just back to the whole traditional way of doing things before everything got all perverted and weird. Okay, also when it comes to Jesus Christ, right? I guess I'm agnostic, but I think Jesus Christ was a historical figure that was a total badass, like revolutionary, right? Whether he rose on the third day or not, I think a lot of the healing that he did was like some natural health, naturopath type stuff, and the essential oils and the gold and the myrrh and the frankincense. There's something there that human beings can do now without having to be a deity. They just have to tap into that space. And he probably had this connection, like, there's these mystery years, they say, when Jesus was like 19 or this whole chunk of time.
There's a huge piece, John.
Yeah. And there's this guy that did this research. It's called Jesus's Lost Years in India. And the research shows that he went over to India and studied Eastern old school religions, like the early days, the Buddhist type stuff. And probably like really tapped into this nirvana place where he was like a living deity because he was one with the universe and one with God. And there's this like overlap with Christianity and this more spiritual, people refer to as New Age type of thinking. But I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Let me, we got 2 more topics I want to hit on the exit and build front.
Okay.
Technology and privacy, and then community building. So we're coming up here on our time, but we'll go a little bit over if you guys will hang a bit more. Let's talk about technology. I think one of the biggest ways to exit the matrix, and this goes back to the finances as well. We talked about business earlier, but we didn't talk about finances a whole lot, is crypto.
Real quick, John, I can stay, but I'm going to need like 2 minutes. I'll be right back.
Okay, cool. All right, so when it comes to technology, cryptocurrency is like so critical for exiting the matrix and opting out, because traditionally all of the money that people have dealt with has been controlled by banks or corporations or central banks, even worse. And you have to trust these third parties, these corporations and these governments to maintain an accurate ledger, right? Just an accurate record of who has what money and who owes what to what. And so all of a sudden cryptocurrency comes along in 2008, 2009 with Bitcoin, and it creates a situation where people can send money to one another from anywhere in the globe. Not only money, but also different types of information, right? Like Odyssey, we put our videos on Odyssey, which is a blockchain-based social media video platform. And this information goes out and it can't be altered. It can't be manipulated. It can't be inflated. And no one can stop you from transacting in it. So I think when it comes to exit and build, cryptocurrency as a technology, decentralized blockchain technology is really fundamental and absolutely critical. I think if folks aren't in the cryptocurrency space, I know we beat it like a dead horse along with the food here on Unloose the Goose, but there's still a lot of opportunity to protect wealth if you manage to accumulate wealth throughout your life, and now it's being inflated away by the money manipulators, or to build wealth, because there's still going to be substantial gains on cryptocurrency. There's still very likely to be substantial gains. I never want to speak in absolutes when it comes to the price of cryptocurrency, but I think it's a great opportunity to protect wealth, to build wealth. And then as this whole mark of the beast style system, back to the Bible, it was the mark of the beast style system comes into play, where these technocrats and authoritarians and tyrants want people to have to get permission to transact. They want people to, we easily see the social credit score system is going to be tied with your ability to purchase goods and services. And you're going to be prohibited from purchasing certain types of goods and services. Cryptocurrency is going to be a great way around that. And just as a living example, like one of my businesses, I sell kratom and CBD and Delta 8. And because the kratom and CBD and Delta 8 is competition to the pharmaceutical companies, the federal government pressures the banks, which in turn pressure the credit card companies, to not process credit card transactions for kratom and a bunch of Delta 8 THC kind of stuff. And that's something that they can do because they control that system. But with cryptocurrency, there's not anybody that can get in the way of me and my customers, my clients. So I think it's really critical. Jack, you just did a show or some conversation on NFTs. I haven't dove as deep into the NFT space as I could. Can you break down what that is and some of the bigger, I'm sure you got into some big picture implications of this whole NFT phenomenon?
So yeah, I would advise folks, because we're getting kind of long here, I don't want to go too long, but you can go to the Survival Podcast and just scroll down a bit and you'll find the show that I did. It was like an hour. It was almost 2 hours because the questions that came in were crazy. But what started that whole episode was I read this article, an announcement from a cryptocurrency company called Algorand. And they were announcing they had a partnership with a company called Liquid Vineyards. And I've seen all this stupid shit with NFTs. And I'm like, I know this is the thing, but what's being done with it is stupid, with selling JPEGs of monkeys or whatever, And the way Liquid Vineyards is work, they're building a marketplace. And let's say I have a vineyard and I have a great vineyard and I make great wines. Well, I can go into that marketplace and basically sell the rights to individual vines on my vineyard for 3 to 30 years, depending on how much you want to buy. Think of it like a bottle of the month club, except they're your vines.
Wow.
And the grapes that go into the processing that make the wine, make wine that's your wine. So now you're sitting at home and you have your wine snob friend and he comes over. Let's say I'm a wine snob and John's my wine snob friend, and he comes over and I've got this really great wine from down the road, and I've got this really great wine from the trip I took to Napa, but I've got this really great wine, let's say from the Finger Lakes of New York, a Riesling. And I'm like, I own 5 vines on this vineyard. Which bottle do you think I'm going to pour for John? right? The viral marketing in this is huge. But when I saw that, I'm like, oh, and like, how are they going to do it? Well, they actually RFID tag the vines. And then anybody that's doing a sophisticated operation, you track everything. That's how you know you're making money or losing money. So it's not really that hard to say these grapes went into this tank that made this wine and the yield is X and John gets 50 bottles this year. And I'm like, well, if you can do it with that, what can't you do it with? We could do it with, like, do you think of like cow shares where we do milk and whatever? What if you, like, a guy wants to expand his beef herd? What if he sells fractional ownership in some of his heifers, including the calves they're going to produce, which will be heifers that are going to grow up and produce more calves for as long or short a duration as you want to make that available. But then this becomes a thing that I think we can actually use to revitalize local communities. And it made me think of you because of your freedom cell concept, John, where we have these local freedom cells and then they kind of federate with other freedom cells. Well, now you can go into like a global marketplace, right? And you can fractionalize pieces and components. And this isn't really a loophole. We think of it as a loophole, and I described it as a legitimate, big, stiff loophole, one that's not going to close. Anything you're selling with an NFT, if you're doing it right, is something you could sell anyway. If I want to sell you fractional ownership in a cow I already own, that's fine. If I want you to invest in my ranch and I publicly solicit funds for that and promise you ROI, that's a security. But if I own the cow or I own the grapevine or I own the apple tree or whatever, and I'm just pre-selling a piece of it, that's okay. If I own a building and I want to sell you 10% interest in my building, I can do that. I can't solicit funds to go buy buildings, right? So that's how this NFT operates. So anything you could sell, what we're doing with the NFT is we're giving that really tight affiliation between the customer and the supplier. And we're creating that level of like a vanity association, which is great for marketing. But what we're doing is we're automating the obligations, right? So if I say I'm going to write a book, and if you pre-buy the book and you have an NFT in the book, you get 10% of the future royalties off the book. That's totally legit. I'm not violating any securities and exchange shit or anything like that. But then what am I going to do? Every month I'm going to sit down and run Excel and figure that shit out. I can tie that into a smart contract that runs on the same chain the NFT is. Let's say Algorand. You have a wallet. You enter your address when you enter into the agreement. My money comes in. A piece of it gets broken off. Atomic swaps into Algorand. Boom, everybody gets paid. I've just eliminated accounting, compliance. I've eliminated 100 freaking jobs. Wow. But then I've also taken the small person, the John Bush, the Jack Spirko, the Neethi, and I've let them play in the same space these rich motherfuckers have been playing in with the stock market and open this market around the world. And for more, go listen to the episode. Like I said, it's like 2 hours long. But it's so much more than selling a goddamn JPEG of a monkey. It really is. Somebody came and commented on that episode, and they're like, NFTs equals gambling. And I'm like, thank you for proving the point that if you join a conversation without listening to it first, you look stupid. I appreciate you proving that point because that's not what we're talking about here. So you could do this, like you could do affordable housing and you could start building tiny houses that lease out. And then your investors that aren't really investors, they're pre-buying or they're buying a piece of, like you could set up a smart contract that once we make X dollars of return, we've paid for everything and we've made 10% on our money. We're going to sell the properties at cost plus 10. We're going to take our profit off that and we're going to make affordable housing. There's literally nothing you can't do with this as long as what you're selling is legitimate to sell. You're just tokenizing the item and automating the process of obligation.
I love it. That's, the deeper level implication, a lot of this cryptocurrency stuff. When people first learned about it, it's just like, okay, you can send money back and forth. In reality, there's all sorts of different smart contract and decentralized applications where so many financial mechanisms, legacy financial mechanisms, insurance, decentralized finance, lending and borrowing. Like I have a DeFi fund and I'm using it to fund home improvement projects on the house. I used it to paint the house. I used it for the down payment on our solar panels, and I use it for the down payment on our Tesla. I'm about to use it to pay for an automatic gate, and it's all just taking crypto as collateral and taking loans on it. And now this NFT stuff, like I was thinking in my head, whenever I purchase large lots of inventory, like I usually buy 100 kilos at a time, people could have NFTs that are tied to those particular pieces of investment, that particular lot, right? And then as it sells and works its way through the business and such, people can get a little taste of that. I appreciate it. Somebody here, I don't know if they haven't been listening for a while, but they think crypto is doubling down on the current system. Nothing further from the truth.
I can't even begin to do this again. I'm sorry that you feel that way. Like, so you're saying that something that's completely decentralized and totally untouchable by government helps government. Okay. I can't. Now, what you were saying though, John, about like DeFi and stuff, like I had Gray Wolf from Polarity on last week, and he was talking about the way that some people are doing like a mortgage now. If they have a lot of crypto, but they don't want to spend it, they're putting their crypto into a yield farm, and then they're taking a DeFi loan with that collateralized. And then the interest is paying off the loan. And as the amount needed in the yield farm goes down, it begins to come out so that only enough is there to make the remaining payments. And they're paying off their house instead of in 30 years, 5-7 years.
Wow.
But they're coming out with the same balance they went in with. Right. Like, and they're also freeing up capital as it's like old school life insurance. There's something called declining term that you like when insurance agents actually had the best interests of their clients at heart. They might go to a young couple that just bought a house with a 20-year mortgage and say, like, for covering your house, right, you could use 20-year declining terms. So if you have $200,000 out on the house, we give a $200,000 policy, and the amount of coverage goes down every year, so the rate's cheap. And this part of insurance is only for your house. So it's kind of that approach, except it's using your own money to fund it. Like what we're doing with crypto is enabling things that government doesn't like, but people that say you're doubling down on helping the system, no, we're crippling the system and we're bringing the system into compliance. They're going to co-opt it because they're going to have no choice. And that's, you know what? That's fine with me. Like some of the things they're gonna stick their hooks in, some of the things they're going to skim from, some of the things they're gonna make a little bit harder. But even people we think of as the enemy are actually doing good for us now in crypto. So everybody's all up in arms because Dorsey got kicked out of Twitter. I don't care. Dorsey hasn't done anything in Twitter for 3 years. Dorsey's all in on Square. That's where all his time's going. That's why the major stockholders wanted him gone, because he's not doing anything. But what people don't know about Dorsey, I'm not saying the guy's a good guy, but he's doing something good. And that is they're developing a DEX-based crypto solution for the on and off ramps between fiat and crypto, because that's what they're going to regulate. So he's actually developing a way around that. He can be the scum of the earth, but if he does that, he's done one good thing for humanity, right? Like, no, there's too much in this. And the people that keep making those claims, like that last guy, you don't understand what this technology does. You're the guy that's screaming, why the hell would this business need a telephone in 1905? That's who you are. And I'm sorry that you're a boomer. I hate to put it that way, and I hate to put it this way, but if you're still on the like kicking Bitcoin thing, it's stupid. You're going to go, buy gold, whatever. Have fun being poor. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. And, I did a whole free webinar, buildwealthoptout.com, buildwealthoptout.com. If Christopher Murphy wants to check it out, I overcome some of these objections and kind of share really what it's all valuable. Some people don't even really want to know. They've already made up their minds, which is fine. All right, we got one more topic. Let's hit it pretty quick. And that's exit and build when it comes to community. And if you notice throughout the discussion of business, entrepreneurship, health, food production, and finances and technology, community is a huge part of it, because without our fellow human beings, I mean, we're social animals, but especially when it comes to the pursuit of freedom, we can really help lift one another up. And I think community building, leaning on one another, associating and building with like-minded people is really super critical if we are to find freedom. The strength in numbers, the innovation, the ideas that get shared, pulling resources together to buy property, to invest in businesses, to buy the bug out supplies or the storable food. It just really makes, what do they say? More hands makes for light work, or
many hands make light work.
Yes.
Yeah, it's critical. Somebody was asking earlier if there's freedom cells in Mexico. There most definitely is. In fact, Derek Bros, who co-founded the Freedom Cell Network with me, he's in Michoacan, Morelia. And so you can go to freedomcells.org, freedomcells.org. It's a peer-to-peer group of like-minded people working together on common goals, organized in small little groups. And there's most definitely a lot of freedom cell action there. In fact, Derek's about to do a tour through Mexico, visiting all sorts of cities and stuff. It was cool. This guy that I know from the Free State Project from Pork Fest, he stayed. He's all hippie now and spiritual, and he spends a lot of time in Guatemala. He figured out a way to earn a living doing festivals, selling these really cool kind of, out there clothes. And that's his life. He's total agorist, living off of crypto, which is super cool. But he said he was in this random Mexican town and he sees a flyer that Derek Bros is speaking in this random Mexican town. He's like, holy shit, I know that guy. So, our people are all over the place, and community is absolutely critical. You got quite the community with all the survival podcast folks, and you're doing these workshops and stuff. How's that going?
It's the actual payday of everything I do. The money is just what enables a lifestyle. Like it's a weird thing. Like, because of where I live, I don't have like the strong, like next house over community that Nicole does. It's too bad she's not here for this one, because she's kind of the master of building that and bringing people in. A detriment to where I live. Like, I live in a very affordable home, but I'm surrounded by very expensive homes. So that makes it harder when something goes up for sale. And you're like, oh, there's a house for sale like down the road for me. And people are like, really? I'd be great to live there. How much is it? You're like 750,000. Or like, in Texas, what is it? Well, it's like a 13-acre ranch, and it makes that harder. We have more of like these satellite communities and this, it's basically global. And then you have these coalescence where people come together with it. And I love the idea of the local strong community. I wish it was easier to bring people physically closer, but there's an advantage to having kind of these distributed communities, or these decentralized communities, maybe, to think about it that way, in that when I needed something done in Pennsylvania and I reached out, I had like a dozen people go, what do you need? Like, I literally had to stop, like, I'm good. I got it. Somebody did it. Like, it's okay. And that's incredibly powerful. And I think that's how we bridge the gap between like our online and our offline communities, is actually, meet in real life, get things done. And then understand the power of what you have when you build a community like that. And then never, ever, ever take advantage of it. Never abuse it. Never take it for granted. I think that's like the most important thing. And I've seen some people that kind of are in like the edges of our space anyway. And when I look at what they're doing, I'm like, you're really starting to like vampire your community. And there's probably some names that are coming to mind that I don't want to, start a war with anybody or anything, but there's some like that. Like, they're literally extracting from their community. And I think if you want to build community, you always have to be, if like every time something comes out, you try to throw more back in that came out, you'll never catch up. You'll always have a surplus. But if you extract for long enough, you will wear people out, and they will go away from you, and you'll lose what you built. So that's kind of my thoughts on community.
Yeah. Always try to put more in than you get out, add more value than you take, and just help people, really. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about just helping people. When there's somebody in your crew or that's like-minded, that's in need, do what you can to help them, because even if you are like somebody that's so focused on self-interest, when you help other people, it always comes back to you, oftentimes more abundantly. I remember me and my ex-wife, when we first got together, we traveled all around the country. And this was after the Ron Paul campaign. It was like 2009, 2010. We were living off of her 401k. She cashed it out, and we went and visited fusion centers and stuff. And we didn't have an income. We were both pretty broke, but we felt wealth because we knew that we could pull into just about any city in the country, post on Facebook and Twitter, and somebody would put us up. Or if we, got stranded on the side of the road, there were so many people already back in 2010, just from the whole Ron Paul revolution, that it really was a big eye opener that, wealth isn't just about money. A lot of it has to do with being able to meet your needs and overcome problems. And a lot of that has to do with having people in your corner. You want to tell us about your membership thing you got going there, the church that you guys do? And you're in North Carolina. I thought you were in Tennessee for some reason.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in North Carolina. Can I just answer something also?
Yeah, what do you got?
Jake Robinson on here is saying, can't figure out why Neethi doesn't come to Jack's workshop.
Get him.
Okay, let me tell you. I just had this conversation last episode.
Hold on real quick. Jake, it's because you're a pain in the ass and you're always there, and she doesn't want to deal with you. Go ahead, Neethi.
I mean, first of all, guys, I just met Jack in the past year. That's number one. Number two, I already said I was so sad because I really, really wanted to be there when I was actually thinking about planning to come there in August. Then I was like, if I buy a plane ticket right now, can I even really get on the plane in November with this crazy world? I'm not really sure. So I wasn't very comfortable with doing that in August. Secondly, just so everybody knows, I told y'all last week, I'm in the middle of building like something over here because I had to pivot like a million times after this freaking COVID crap. And I'm in new commercial space and I just don't have everything established here for me to have cover the way that I did when I did have brick and mortar several years ago. So I'm starting kind of all over with some of that. Also, I'm working on a big project. I am about to launch in January. I'm super excited. What?
Triple launch. That's going to be
launch. Yeah, because we're going to be planting food churches. And so I am launching an affiliate program. So I'm working on getting that taken care of. And so I had to hunker down, but I was super sad. And I watched everything online and it wasn't as fun. And I did ask, Jack probably knows, I called Nicole and I was like, I think I'm just going to jump on a plane. And I was going to do it at the last minute, like the weekend before. Or actually 2 weeks before, because the flights still weren't too bad. But by the time that I talked it over with everybody, the flights went back up to like $1,000. And I was like,
oh, wow. And I told Nicole to tell you, don't do that. Don't put yourself out for like a half a day here or something like that. You know,
no, I mean, I want to be able to come.
Don't worry. We're going to shoot Jake. We shoot Jake every year. He gets, he has a pre-destined airsoft pellet all ready to shoot him with for next year. For being a pain in the ass and even bothering you with that. The hell with him. No, he got shot this year. It was a beautiful shot. He was at a distance and he was on the move and I got him right in the belly, put a big welt on him. So like he's getting another one in the ass next year just for even doing that to you.
God. I'm going to get you, Jake. I'm going to get you when I get down there. That's what's going to happen.
Hey, you come next year, Anithi, and I'll give you one of the green gas blowbacks with like 18 rounds. And you shoot him until he shuts up.
I'll be like, where's Jake?
Not in the face. Not in the face and at least 10 feet away. That's the rules of engagement in airsoft combat.
All right. Okay, cool. Well, yep.
Oh, but now I didn't even answer the question. What were you asking?
Well, go ahead. Tell us about your membership church thing you got going there and the community that you've built.
Yes, guys. Okay, so by the way, I'm super excited because I have new Unloose the Goose people who are reaching out to me, and I love y'all for doing it because they're here local. And if you are in the area, we would love for you to come join the food church. You know, like I was saying, it is membership based, but we have strong patriots that are coming here and supporting us. I am being very discriminatory. So if you are trying to get in, then there's a rigorous, like interview process. Just mainly because, look, I don't want anybody telling me that I did not have a conversation with them and say everything ahead of time that, like, hello, I'm this crazy food Nazi person who's a total patriot who is also an agorist and also not playing games. I don't play these reindeer games. So also I'm not building a house of sand. I want a community here where everybody who might get to run into somebody else here that we're all, pretty much like-minded, at least about the food, if nothing else, so, and that we're all good patriots. So that's what's going on here. Check me out on farm2forkmeetriot.org. And also, if you were to do that in January, hopefully I'll have everything set up. I have a deadline. I have a goal. To have all my online everything's done before Christmas, before I leave to visit our family for Christmas. So
set goals and plans. Let's do it. All right. Well, this has been Unloose the Goose, episode 63, talking about exit and build strategy, various ways we can exit the matrix, build a better world for ourselves personally, and then link up with like-minded people to strengthen our power and leverage the strength in numbers that comes with people doing stuff together. And, I'm always optimistic about the future, the way things are going. Jack, few episodes ago, you pointed out that you got this Ron Paul report that goes on your podcast feed, and somebody said something like, it's not that the system is collapsing. It's not that things are collapsing. It's that the old way of doing things is collapsing. What was that?
Yeah, it was Chris over there with Ron. He said, maybe it's not that our world is collapsing. Their world is collapsing.
It is.
And they're fighting to keep it. Like, so what you have is a beast in its death throes.
Yep.
And he didn't say that. I'm saying that now. And one thing we have to remember, that's good news. But a cornered dying beast while it's dying is dangerous. Like the most hurt I've ever been by an animal was a pig that I shot, and it looked all but dead, but it was still breathing. And when I took a knife and stabbed it in the heart, and as I did that, I ended up cutting myself fairly badly with that one last throw. So don't let that over optimize your enthusiasm. Like, still be careful when you're dealing with the dying beast. But I really believe the beast system is dying. And I'm not saying that in some sort of like religious, the beast 666. I don't mean it that way. I mean, like, it's a beast. Like, if you just look at the system of control, it's the greatest beast that's ever been created. I mean, like, when a guy gets in the ring and he's a huge dude, you say he's a beast. I mean it that way. Like, that beast is freaking dangerous and it's huge, but its world was built on a lie.
Lies.
And you can keep a lie propped up for a couple centuries, but eventually the lie has to be reckoned with. Mm-hmm. And I think humanity is starting. And I think actually everybody talks about how bad it is this stuff happened with COVID. I'm grateful. I've seen more
thing that ever happened.
I've seen more awakening in the past 19 months than I've seen in the last 19 years. I have seen more people talk about the stuff we're talking about tonight. And I've been doing this since 2008 professionally, and I have never seen the enthusiasm, the motivation, etc. I see a lot of fear too.
Yes.
But that doesn't bother me, because when I was dealing with this shit in 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, when none of this COVID shit was going on, everybody that came into it, they always started from fear. It's always fear that causes the wake up.
Or trauma or crisis.
Yeah, and something that touches that primal instinct. But then once you start to gain control of it, then you touch your power.
Yes.
And your own power is the greatest drug you'll ever experience, right? Like, once you experience that, you realize there's nothing you can't do. And I've seen more people come out of the matrix in the last 19 months than the last 19 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. In this case, a greater reaction, right? We saw the Freedom Cell Network go from 1,000 people pre-COVID to now 28,000 plus, about to be 30,000 people. So the awakening, what do they call it? I guess the Great Awakening is kind of like this Trump thing, but
yeah,
it's happening. It's true. All right, cool. Well, this is the Unloose the Goose podcast. If you're just watching us live here and you're not subscribed to the podcast feed, you can subscribe on all the most popular podcast feeds there at unloosethegoose.com. Check us out on our email newsletter as well. You can subscribe on the website, also unloosethegoose.com. All right, this has been real. Thank you so much, Neethi and Jack. Until next week.
You.
Honk, honk.
Honk, honk.
Peace. Later.